Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Dayna Harris with Farient Advisors and Keith Feicks of OM Group. Now we're talking today about getting to yes after a failed Say on Pay vote. Keith, I understand that OM Group had a failed vote in 2012. Can you take us through what OM Group did to respond to that failed vote?
Well, after the initial disappointment, maybe a little bit of embarrassment that we had, we realized there was no rest for the weary. We had to roll up our sleeves and get to work very quickly. Now, going into that vote, we had a good idea that we were going to fail the quantitative pay for performance piece, but we felt very confident that on the qualitative side of our pay programs we would pass. Well, obviously, we got a resounding failed vote there. So what we did very quickly was we reached out to our shareholders in ISS and Glass Lewis to understand where their disagreement with us was. From there, we quickly hired Farient to come in to be our new compensation advisor. And they really helped us break down all of our compensation programs, a very exhaustive approach as to what our programs were, how they were benchmarked to the outside, and then allowed us to see how that tied back to our new business strategy that we were in the process of implementing. From there, we went back to our shareholders in ISS to explain what our new programs were going to be on a go-forward basis, just so they were aligned with what our thinking was and making sure we didn't miss anything we initially heard from them earlier after the failed Say on Pay vote.
So Dayna, what was the approach in terms of rethinking the compensation program at OM Group?
So the first part of the step was to understand what the objectives were going to be with the pay program and how to make certain that there was pay and performance alignment. And the first part of this was two-part, and one was to end up with a program that was a better strategy in terms of compensation strategy that fit the evolving strategy of the company and where it was going to becoming more of a high-valued business. The second part of this was to make certain that the performance measures that were in place and the way the program was designed, that it was in support of that particular strategy, and resolved all of the issues that that the investors had.
So Keith, in terms of the executive compensation program, has that been a game changer in terms of Say on Pay votes?
Oh, definitely. If you look at our last two votes for 13 and 14, we had a 99% resounding vote in 2013. We're at 98.5.6 for 2014 here. So obviously we think it was a game changer overall there. Our pay for performance is still lagging a little bit because of some historical stock price. But if you look at our overall comp programs and how they're aligned to our new business strategy, it's clearly paying dividends for us in terms of our vote. Not to mention that both in our long-term and short-term incentive plans now, Farient helped us identify key metrics that are a strong link to shareholder value overall. So again, those are the links that both our shareholders as well as proxy advisors are starting to look at from us.
So how was this communicated to shareholders?
We did a shareholder outreach where we contacted the largest investors in the company and had conversations with them about the types of changes that we were going to make. More specifically, things that were related to the issues that had been identified. Some of those issues were things such as the peer group composition. The companies in the peer group were too large. Another one of the issues in comments that was out there was that the CEO's pay was above market. Another one of the issues was that some of the performance measures were not really linked to total shareholder return. And last, one of the other issues was, or second to last, one of the other issues was that some of the LTI program really didn't have enough performance-based incentives in it. And then the final issue was something more minor. It was a governance-related issue in the program, that there were no clawbacks. So as a result, we did our own investigation in terms of analyzing all of this information anyway, and a complete comprehensive pay program redesign. We summarized and put that back there for the shareholders in terms of how the program was going to be changed. And we specifically changed the peer group so that it was more appropriately designed for OM Group's new business strategy and transformation as it went forward. We made certain that we were going to size adjust our compensation results and levels so that they too would be appropriate for OMG and its size going forward. That all helped when we went to deal with the CEOs, the question of the CEO's pay being above market, where we looked at that, said, you know, we need to tweak some things here, and one of the places we tweaked it was the 2013 LTI grant was smaller than it had been in the past. We then looked at the incentive program specifically and passed along to shareholders how we were going to keep two of the incentive measures that we thought were quite key to the success of the company, with one being operating income and the other being RONA. We added a peer relative TSR measure, and we also increased the proportion of LTI incentives that were performance-based. In other words, we eliminated restricted stock, of course, which has no performance measures attached to it. So, and we added a clawback. That was the low-hanging fruit. But as a result, we had all of those things, shared it with the shareholders. We also shared it with the leading proxy advisor groups to test their reaction, to see if they had anything in particular that was of a concern, and we didn't find any of that. We then did the proxy disclosure, a summary up front, making certain that everything was clear in terms of what we had changed and why we had changed it.
So Dayna, take us through some of the considerations now and looking forward. How do you stay proactive for future votes?
Well, it's an ongoing process, and you can't, just because you passed it the first year doesn't mean you're going to, when you've come back and you revisited all your programs, doesn't mean you're going to pass it in subsequent years. So you can never just let things go. You have to be very conscientious and proactive of your program. Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? And therefore make certain that you tweak here and there and communicate why you've tweaked those changes. One of the big issues companies face when they have the say on pay vote is you're 5 months through your new fiscal year when you find out that you're not going to pass, and now you've got to make changes. You really can't change the program in place for the most part. You might be able to tweak things around the edge at the end of the year, like perhaps take into account the vote when you go to pay your annual incentive out. For the most part, your changes are set for the early part of the following year, and those will be coming down the path. So you want to be able to follow up in your subsequent proxy disclosure about how they really worked out for you and why they were so good.
Certainly, a failed vote is undesirable by any stretch, but it sounds like you've learned a lot along the way. What advice would each of you have for those who are looking to improve their shareholder vote?
I think there's 4 key things that I really took away from our last 24 months after this sale pay on pay vote. Number 1, and probably most importantly, make sure your comp programs are aligned to your business strategy overall. And then once you have aligned those, number 2, reach out to your shareholders, proxy advisors, to make sure they are aligned and understand what you have put into place and why you have put it into place. If there needs to be some changes based on their feedback, by all means go ahead and do that. Number 3 then is disclosure within the proxy. It's just as important to explain the why and the how as much as the what you have actually been paying out to folks, and it was a key lesson learned from us overall. And then I think the last piece overall is good governance, as Dayna had mentioned earlier. That good governance, why risk it? Unless you have a very compelling business reason tied to your business strategy as to why that needs to stay in your pay program. But again, you're going to have to clearly articulate and communicate that to both your shareholders and proxy advisors so they're aligned with that as well.
Dayna, any other advice?
Well, I would say that when a company gets its say on pay vote, if you've got 80% or less in favor of your pay program, it's time to take a look. Pay attention to that. That's a warning sign. We've seen that with companies where it didn't come out of the blue and they're in the 70s, and then they don't pay attention to it, and all of a sudden they don't pass after 2 or 3 years. So pay attention to it, learn what's wrong in your pay program, and then make sure that you go back and address those issues. Be preemptive. Get the answer right. Go back in your new disclosure to the proxies, make it very clear what you've done and why you've made those changes. The why is so important. Keith mentioned that as well. Why did you choose these measures? Why did you set these goals? How did you set these goals? Because all of that is what shareholders want to be able to see, and they want to see it summarized so they don't have to go digging through a million pages.
Thanks for sharing your story and your learnings.
Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome.
For World at Work, I'm Allison Avalos.